You have done this before. You have stood in front of a mirror, or at the edge of a new year, or after some quietly devastating moment, and you have made the decision. This time is different. This time, you are really going to do it. Exercise. Eat better. Wake up earlier. Read more. Stop wasting your evenings. Stop being the person you do not want to be. And start becoming the one you know, somewhere deep down that you actually are. And you meant it. You felt it. The decision was real. So you went in hard. You set the alarm for 5:30 in the morning. You cleared your kitchen of everything bad. You downloaded the app. You made the plan. You told someone about it, so there was accountability. You started Monday, because it always has to be Monday, with full intensity, full commitment, full belief. And for a few days, maybe even a full week, it worked. You were proud of yourself. You thought, this time is actually different. Then something happened. Or rather, nothing dramatic happened. Life just showed up. You got tired. Work got heavy. One bad night bled into one skipped morning. The alarm went off, and you turned it off. The plan that felt so solid started to feel like it belonged to a different, more energetic version of you. Someone you were pretending to be for a few days, before reality came back to collect what it was owed. And then came the worst part. Not the failure itself, the story you told yourself about it. I have no self-discipline. I never follow through. Other people can do this. Something is wrong with me. You have heard those words inside your own head. Maybe you are hearing them right now. But what if I told you that none of that is true? What if I told you that the problem was never your willpower, never your character, never some deep personal flaw that keeps sabotaging you? What if the entire approach, the intensity, the all-or-nothing commitment, the go hard or go home philosophy was the problem all along? What if trying harder was exactly the wrong move? And what if the science of how human beings actually change had been quietly telling you something completely different? Something that almost no one is talking about. That is what we are exploring today. This video is for you who has started over more times than you can count. For you who is intelligent enough to understand what you need to do and frustrated enough to wonder why you keep failing to do it. For you who has blamed your motivation, doubted your willpower, and quietly concluded that maybe you are just not built for consistency. I want to say something directly to you. You are not the problem. The approach is the problem. The system is the problem. And the cultural mythology around discipline and change, the mythology that says the harder you push, the more you want it, the more you will succeed, is not just unhelpful. It is actively working against the way your brain is designed to operate. Today we are going into the science underneath that. We are going to dismantle the story you have been sold about willpower and motivation, and replace it with something that actually works. Something rooted not in fantasy, but in how behavior is genuinely wired into the human mind. By the end of this, you will not just understand why you have struggled. You will understand why that struggle was almost inevitable, given the tools you were handed. And more importantly, you will have something new, a different approach. One that starts not with more force, but with something so small, it almost seems absurd. Stay with me, because this shift in understanding might be the most useful thing you encounter this year. Let's begin at the root. You grew up inside a story about change. The story goes something like this. If you want something badly enough, you will do it. If you are disciplined, consistent, and strong-willed, you will succeed. And if you fail, if you quit or collapse or fall back into old patterns, it is because you did not want it badly enough. You were not strong enough. You lacked what it takes. This story is everywhere. It is in motivational content, in fitness culture, in the language people use when they talk about productivity. Hustle, push, no excuses. Be stronger than your excuses. The implicit message in all of it is the same. The difference between the people who succeed and the people who don't is a question of character. And you believed it. Because everyone believed it. And because every time you failed, it seemed to confirm the story. If you had been stronger, you would have made it. The evidence was your own life. But here is the uncomfortable truth that nobody is saying loudly enough. That story is wrong. Not partially wrong. Not wrong in a nuanced philosophical way. Wrong in the basic factual sense that it misrepresents how human behavior actually works. Dr. B.J. Fogg spent 20 years at Stanford researching human behavior. He coached over 40,000 people personally, not theoretically, not through data abstractions, but in direct, week-by-week contact with real people, trying to make real changes in their actual lives. And what he found, again and again, consistently across thousands of people, was this. When people fail to create habits, the problem is almost never motivation. And it is almost never willpower. It is design. Think about that. If you tried to build a piece of furniture and the instructions were incomplete, pieces missing, diagrams unclear, steps out of order, you would feel frustrated, but you would not blame yourself. You would blame the instructions. You would say the system was broken, not that you were broken. But when you try to build a new habit, using a system that is fundamentally flawed, a system based on force rather than fit, on willpower rather than design, and it collapses, you turn the blame entirely inward. You decide you are the defective piece. You were never capable of this. This is the first thing you need to understand. The self-blame is the wrong diagnosis. And as long as you carry the wrong diagnosis, no amount of trying harder will get you to a different result. You will simply be more intensely wrong. So what is the right diagnosis? Fogg's research produced something elegantly simple. A model that explains every human behavior, not just the ones you want to build, but the ones you want to stop. The ones that feel automatic. The ones that feel impossible. He calls it the Fogg behavior model. And in its most compressed form, it looks like this. Behavior happens when motivation, ability, and a prompt all converge at the same moment. That is it. Every time you do anything. Check your phone, eat something you did not plan to eat, go for a walk, skip the gym, open Instagram at midnight. These three forces were all present at the same time. Motivation, your desire to do the behavior. Ability, how easy it is to do it. Prompt, the cue that triggers it. This sounds simple, but the implications are enormous. Here is the first one. If any one of these three elements is absent or too weak, the behavior does not happen. No matter how much you want to exercise, if you have no prompt, no cue, no trigger, nothing pulling you toward the action at the right moment, you will not do it. No matter how obvious the prompt, if the behavior feels too hard, you will not do it. These three elements are not optional. They are the architecture of all behavior. Now here is where it gets interesting and uncomfortable. When most people try to build a new habit, they focus almost entirely on motivation. They try to want it more. They watch motivational content. They write inspiring notes to themselves. They visualize the future version of themselves. They try to feel it deeply enough that the feeling alone will carry them through. But motivation, and this is the part that changes everything, is not a reliable engine. It is not a stable force you can count on. It moves. It spikes and crashes. It is high on Monday morning and gone by Thursday evening. It responds to sleep, to stress, to disappointment, to the weather. Motivation is, at its core, a feeling. And feelings are not designed to sustain long-term behavior. They are signals, not systems. This is why every time you have relied on motivation to carry you through, it has eventually let you down. Not because you were weak, because motivation is not built for that job. You were asking a candle to light a stadium. And willpower is no different. Research in psychology has shown consistently that willpower behaves like a resource that depletes with use. Every decision you make, every resistance you mount, every time you hold yourself back from something, it draws from the same finite pool. By evening, after a full day of work and choices and small resistances, your willpower is diminished. And that is precisely when the old habits reassert themselves, because they are easy. And easy always wins when the energy for hard is exhausted. Fogg's insight cuts right through this. Stop asking motivation and willpower to do the work of design. You do not need to feel more. You need to design better. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. This is where it gets darker. Because I want to name something specifically. Something most people will not admit to themselves, but will recognize the moment they hear it. You have not just been using the wrong system. You have been using a system that punishes you for failing. And that punishment, the inner critic that shows up every time you miss a day, break a streak, fall short of your plan, has been training you to associate effort with shame. Think about that. Every time you try hard and fail, and the trying hard approach almost guarantees you will fail. Because it relies on forces that are not designed for consistency, you confirm a story about yourself. And slowly, the act of attempting change becomes loaded with that story. You do not just try and fail. You try, fail, and feel confirmed in your inadequacy. The trying itself starts to feel dangerous, because it is always followed by the same internal punishment. This is why over time, people stop starting. Not because they do not want to change, because they are protecting themselves from the cycle of hope and shame they have lived through too many times. Fogg worked with a woman named Linda, who was in the middle of what he described as a hurricane-strength life storm. In a short span of years, she lost her son to overdose, discovered her husband had Alzheimer's disease, watched the family business collapse into bankruptcy, and lost everything they had built. The savings, the house, the horse ranch she had loved. She had kids to keep going for, and no time to fall apart. When she started engaging with tiny habits, she told Fogg that every morning she found herself on the edge of her bed, struggling to put her feet on the floor. That is where she was. That is the scale of the task she was facing. And here is the question I want you to sit with. If a woman in that situation cannot use motivation and willpower to climb out, what makes you think those tools will be enough when life is merely difficult rather than devastating? The answer is, they are not. They never were. What Linda needed, what you need, is not more force. It is the right lever. There is a specific pattern that runs through almost every failed attempt at change. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. It starts with an aspiration. Something you genuinely want. To be healthier, more focused, more disciplined, more present. The aspiration is real. The desire is genuine. Then you decide on a behavior that would move you toward that aspiration. And almost always, because of the cultural mythology we have already talked about, you decide on something large. You will run 5 kilometers every morning. You will meditate for 30 minutes before work. You will completely overhaul how you eat. You will become a different person, and you will become them now. The size of the behavior communicates the seriousness of the commitment. Going small feels like not really trying. Going big feels like being someone who means it. But here is what actually happens inside your nervous system when you set a large, hard behavior as the target. First, the expectation of difficulty creates resistance before you even begin. Your brain does not love effortful new things. It loves efficient, familiar ones. The bigger the behavior, the more the brain flags it as costly. The more it costs, the more motivation you need to sustain it. The more motivation you need, the more vulnerable you are to any fluctuation in how you feel. Second, and this is crucial, large behaviors have a high failure threshold. If you commit to meditating 30 minutes a day and you only manage 10, you have failed. Even if 10 minutes of meditation would have been genuinely beneficial, the gap between what you intended and what you did becomes a wound. The shame that follows is not just unpleasant, it is neurological. Your brain links the behavior with the bad feeling, and over time, the behavior itself starts to feel like a path to pain. You avoid starting because starting leads to falling short, and falling short leads to the inner verdict you are trying to escape. Fogg calls this a design flaw, not a personal flaw. The instruction manual was broken. The system was set up to fail, and you blamed yourself for the broken system. Now let me show you the other way. Here is the truth that requires the most courage to accept. because it sounds too simple to be real. The path to big change runs directly through small action, not around it, not despite it, through it. Fogg spent decades discovering what happens when people start absurdly small, smaller than they believe they should, smaller than feels worthy of the aspiration they carry. And what he found was consistent and remarkable. When the starting behavior is tiny, almost everything that prevents change becomes irrelevant. You do not need high motivation to do something tiny. You do not need willpower. You do not need to be having a good week or a good morning. You do not need to wait for the ideal conditions. Tiny fits into real life because it does not demand that life get out of the way first. Here is the model. A tiny habit is built on 3 elements: an anchor moment, a tiny behavior, and an instant celebration. The anchor moment is something that already happens reliably in your life, not something you are trying to make happen, something that already does. You brush your teeth, you brew coffee, you sit down at your desk, you get into your car. These are anchors. They are existing moments in your daily routine that can hold a new behavior in place. The tiny behavior is the smallest possible version of the habit you actually want, not the full version, not the responsible, serious version. The version so small it feels almost silly. Fogg's own example is this. After using the bathroom, he would do 2 push-ups. 2. Not 20. Not a full workout. 2 push-ups. He started there. This is the part that makes people uncomfortable. 2 push-ups is not going to change my life. And they are right. 2 push-ups by themselves will not. But that is not the point. The point is the habit formation, not the volume. The point is that you are building the neurological groove, the automatic trigger response loop that will carry more weight as it grows. You are laying the track, not running the full distance. The instant celebration is the element that almost everyone ignores, and it may be the most important of the 3. Immediately after performing the tiny behavior, you do something that creates a genuine feeling of success, a quiet fist pump, a moment of authentic pride. You tell yourself, I did it, not sarcastically, not as performance, as a real acknowledgement that something was done. Here is why this matters at the level of neuroscience. Habits are wired into the brain through a neurochemical loop. When a behavior is followed by a positive feeling, the brain releases dopamine. That dopamine is what cements the connection between the trigger and the behavior. It is the chemical language of, this was worth doing, do it again. Without that signal, the habit does not wire in with the same strength. The celebration is not vanity. It is neuroscience. Fogg writes that we change best by feeling good, not by feeling bad. And this contradicts everything you have been told. The cultural assumption is that the way to change is through pressure, through accountability, through the threat of shame if you fail. But shame does not build habits. Shame builds avoidance. Positive emotion builds habits. Pleasure, pride, and the quiet satisfaction of small wins. These are the actual biological architects of lasting change. Now let us talk about how this actually looks in practice. You want to start meditating. Instead of committing to 20 minutes each morning, a commitment that will collapse the first week you have a chaotic schedule, you commit to 1 breath. Literally, after you pour your first coffee in the morning, you take 1 conscious breath. 1. That is the habit. You want to start exercising. Instead of committing to a gym routine before work, a commitment that fails every time you are tired, stressed, or busy, you commit to putting on your trainers. That is the behavior. After your morning shower, you put on your trainers. That is it. The shoes are on. Whatever happens next is above and beyond. You want to read more? Instead of setting a goal of 30 pages a night, a goal that will go unmet whenever your day has been long, you commit to opening the book. After you get into bed, you open the book. 1 page is a success. 2 pages is extra credit. Finishing a chapter is a triumph. But opening the book is the habit. You see the principle. The tiny behavior is not the final destination. It is the door. And the most important thing about a door is not how wide it opens on the first day. It is that it opens at all. Every day. Reliably. without requiring a perfect set of circumstances to justify it. The behavior grows naturally when the emotion is right. When you feel successful doing the tiny version, your brain and your body want more. The 2 push-ups become 5, become 10, become a routine, because you are following genuine internal momentum rather than forcing yourself against your own grain. There is one more piece of this architecture that matters enormously, and it is perhaps the least intuitive. The tiny habit must be anchored to an existing behavior, not a time. This is where most habit systems fail. They tell you to do something at a specific hour. 7 a.m., meditate. 6 p.m., exercise. And this sounds logical, but time-based triggers are fragile. They rely on your schedule being consistent, your morning unfolding predictably, your evening not running late. Life breaks time-based triggers constantly. Behavior-based anchors are different. They follow you. Brushing your teeth happens whether you wake up at 6 or at 8. Making coffee happens whether it is a workday or a weekend. The anchor moves with your actual life, rather than demanding that your life stay still enough to accommodate it. So the recipe looks like this, in the simplest possible terms. After I anchor, I will tiny behavior. After I pour my coffee, I will take 1 deep breath. After I brush my teeth, I will floss 1 tooth. After I sit down at my desk, I will write 1 sentence. 1. Single. Step. Not because 1 is all you are capable of, but because 1 is all that is required to begin, and beginning, done consistently, is the entire game. There is one more dimension to this that I want to give you, because it changes how you approach the question of where to start. Fogg found something he calls the master variable, a behavior that, when changed, makes every other behavior in your life easier to change. It is not a productivity hack. It is not a morning routine or a journaling practice. It is something far more fundamental, and most of us treat it as optional. Sleep. When you are well rested, motivation rises naturally. Ability rises naturally. Your brain's capacity for self-regulation, its ability to resist impulse, to follow through, to tolerate the discomfort of new things, is dramatically higher. When you are sleep-deprived, everything is harder. Not because you are weak, because your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive function, planning, and habit formation, is literally impaired. This means that if you want to start building tiny habits, the most powerful place to start is not with the habit you most want to build. It is with the conditions that make all habit building possible. Start with sleep. Even one small adjustment, a consistent bedtime, a screen-off ritual, a single habit that signals to your body that rest is coming, begins to shift the entire system. This is the counterintuitive truth at the heart of all of this. Sometimes the most powerful place to intervene is not the problem you can see, but the foundation that everything else rests on. And then there is the question of the prompt. Because no matter how motivated you are, no matter how easy the behavior is, without a reliable prompt, the behavior does not happen. The prompt is the signal. It is the moment that converts potential into action. Designing your prompts is not passive. You do not simply hope you will remember to do the tiny behavior. You engineer the reminder into your environment. Put the book on your pillow if you want to read before sleep. Put the trainers next to the shower if you want to put them on after washing. Put the journal open on your desk if you want to write 1 sentence when you sit down. Make the prompt impossible to miss, because the prompt is what bridges the gap between intention and action. The environment is not neutral. It is either working for you or against you. Most people design their lives for convenience in the moment, and then wonder why their habits are driven by whatever is easiest and most visible, which is usually not what they actually want. Redesign the environment, and you redesign the automatic flow of behavior that happens inside it. This is what discipline actually is. Not the white-knuckled resistance of someone fighting themselves. Not the moral achievement of someone with superior willpower. It is thoughtful, deliberate design. It is removing the prompts for the behaviors you do not want, and creating unmissable prompts for the ones you do. It is making the right behavior easier than the wrong one, until the right behavior becomes the path of least resistance. The person who goes to the gym every morning without struggle is not more disciplined than you in some essential character sense. They have simply designed their environment, their anchor moments, their prompts, and their tiny behaviors in a way that makes going to the gym the natural outcome of their morning, rather than a battle they have to win from scratch every single day. You are not competing with their willpower. You are comparing your unredesigned environment with their redesigned one. So here is where we arrive. You are not broken. You have never been broken. You have been using instructions that were designed for a different kind of machine, one that runs on unlimited motivation and iron willpower, one that does not get tired or scared or overwhelmed by the weight of ordinary life. That machine does not exist. It has never existed. You were trying to become something that no human being can actually be. The real architecture of change is quieter. It is smaller. It is almost embarrassingly humble. 1 breath after coffee, 2 push-ups after using the bathroom, 1 sentence on a page, 1 tooth flossed. These are not the consolation prizes for people who cannot do the real thing. These are the real thing. This is how the brain actually wires new behavior into itself, through consistent, successful, positively reinforced repetition, starting small enough that failure is barely possible. You do not rise to the level of your ambitions. You fall to the level of your systems. But when your systems are built on the right foundation, on design rather than force, on tiny wins rather than massive demands, on how you actually work rather than how you wish you worked, you do not fall, you build. Slowly, quietly, reliably, and from the inside out. The question is not whether you are capable of change. You are. The question is whether you are willing to let go of the story that says harder is better, and begin again, smaller than before, with everything to gain. Now I want you to do one thing before you leave this video. I want you to write in the comments below. I start small. I start now. Not because it sounds good, because saying it publicly is a form of commitment that your brain takes more seriously than a private thought. When you write it, you are not performing for an audience. You are making a declaration to yourself with witnesses. You are signaling to your own nervous system that something has shifted, that this time you are not trying harder. You are trying smarter. You are trying the way human beings are actually built to change. Write it, and then keep going. And whatever you do, do not stop here. The next video is already waiting for you. It is not just more content. It is the next step in this conversation, a deeper layer of what it means to understand yourself and build a life that actually reflects who you are. It is more important than you think. Do not miss it. See you there.